Bluejay Mining is an exploration and development company with projects in Greenland and Finland. The executive structure has been fluid over the past few months, and now investors are looking for calm and constructive progress. I'm joined by non-executive director Rod McIllree. So, Rod, now you served as both chief executive and executive chairman of Bluejay 2015 to 2022. Since then, you've been a non-executive director. There's been a reshuffle on the board. Investors kind of get spooked by change. So what's the makeup like now, and is everything settled?
Yeah, morning, Sarah. Good to be with you. Yeah, look, we've sort of taken it back to basics, I guess. The company did need a little bit of help with respect to a couple of issues that they were dealing with at the time. We were a natural fit for that, having been sort of founding directors of the company, as you said, in 2014. There are several opportunities that really needed that deep understanding, I think, of what the history of the company is, those relationships. Things in Greenland are very important. They need to understand what's happening here as well. So it really had to be us in many respects. That change is now complete. And I think what we have spent the last, certainly, and apologise to investors for not being more front-footed with respect to updates, etc. But we've been working hard to prepare the company for this next phase of growth. What we see in front of us it looks pretty good now. So we're quite excited, and we're sticking around for this one.
So the next phase of growth, is that Greenland only?
Yeah, look, I think that as everybody sort of knows, there's a number of assets in this company, and that in many respects is a blessing and a curse, because what you have is you have to divide your attention and your capital allocations. Your budgets need to take into account multiple assets and progressing all of these things. I think what we have intimated since joining the board, and Eric will certainly come on and introduce himself over the coming weeks and months, is we are now going to focus really just on the main core asset. Because if people sort of remember the history, the whole history of Bluejay, Disko was always a priority for us, but because of the complexity with the ore body and the issues that you have with respect to potential drilling and gas pockets and these things have sort of been resolved now, but you needed a partner that had sort of substance behind them. This was not a small company project. And I think what we had during that time, we were searching the mining universe for a potential partner, and we came close with a group called Anglo American. That was in very late 2020, early 21. But then obviously the COVID sort of issues brought all of that unstuck. That search continued, and we obviously were very fortunate to attract such a competent and technically capable organisation such as KoBold. They have deep pockets, as people would be aware. And it's really now just bringing that focus, because it has been disjointed, I guess, over the last 3 or 4 years, mainly because of issues outside the company's control. A lot of these things, 2 years worth of lockdowns. Greenland was probably slower than most to come out of those lockdowns, so you could almost count sort of almost 3 years up there. We hope to, and it's not something that I'm prepared to go into too much, because KoBold is a very sophisticated organisation and they make their own decisions, and they're very considered, competent people. But we hope to have some news on some upcoming activities in 2024. But I'll leave that for the managing director to elaborate on in the coming weeks and months.
Okay, but what we do need to know for investors who are just hearing about KoBold for the first time, what is KoBold going to be working on? How are they assisting you?
Yeah, so I think from memory, it would be around about August of 2021 or late 2021, somewhere in there, where we first announced their participation in Disko via a joint venture. So there were a set of deliverables that were associated with that agreement. They have part fulfilled those. There's obviously discussions now ongoing about the delivery of the rest of it. They are a private equity, private fund in the US. They're based out on the West Coast, and they kind of, you know, they're up there in terms of the Friedland groups of organizations where they just hire the brightest minds and the best technical people, and you know, they give them budgets and they give them computing power, and they go off searching the world for the most meaningful assets. And they saw very early on in Disco what has been seen over many decades is a recognition that Disco has the potential to be really something quite unique globally. I guess the comparison that you can make is there's a project in Siberia. It's called Norilsk, and it is the largest nickel, cobalt, and palladium mine in the world. They are the marginal producer, so they set the price in many respects for those metals. And the geological analogy here is that Disco is a complete mirror image, if not slightly larger. So, you know, there's a lot to process there in terms of they needed to be comfortable when they first came to the project. They spent time verifying historical information, as one has to do, and they are now in a position where they're considering their next steps. I think that the key benefit from an investment perspective, if people are sort of seeing this for the first time and have only just sort of realised that Bluejay and Disco exist, is that Bluejay will be the only entry point, the only way to get exposure to this project moving forward, because our joint venture partner is a private equity group, as I said. So that has a lot of benefit, you know, if things are successful there. You know, we only need a very small proof of concept, I guess, to come from this drilling, this initial drilling. Not that I'm saying drilling will happen, but as and when we get around to drilling, you only need a couple of meters at a couple of percent nickel, couple of percent copper, and some cobalt in there, because it proves the geological model. And I think once that model is proven, there will be a profound value change in Bluejay. So the KoBold Disco story is one that's simmering away in the background. You know, people can sort of look that up and look them up. They're quite well known. They're broadcast all over the internet. They're active globally, and they do have some of the smartest guys in the room working for them. The rest of the project. Well, sorry, Sarah.
So I'm just wondering, therefore, is if the Cobalt deal sort of comes off, will they take the financial burden? Because I am going to be asking you about money shortly. Will they be taking the financial burden for the project?
Yeah. So the terms of the original joint venture, which was struck probably 2 or 3 years ago now, 2.5 years, saw them carry that 3-year financial commitment, both in terms of expenditure commitment for the Greenland regulatory side of it, as well as over and above meeting those hurdles. So that project is notionally fully funded until we drill it. In a positive sense, the rest of our projects are all also in credit. You know, Finland has a system whereby you can maintain these projects over a fairly long period of time for a reasonable cost. So the company doesn't actually have any expenditure commitments on any of its projects anywhere, and that's a huge benefit, because as you said, you'll come to this, but we raised £1.2 million. It's going through the system at the moment, subject to a general meeting coming up in a week and a half. And that £1.2 million is budgeted to get us through to the end of the year. So we have an asset divestment program that is in place on some of the Finnish projects. I'm not sure really how much I can talk about those, but suffice it to say that, you know, we have a data room now, and we have some interested parties in there, I think. And I don't know where these things go, but the people that are looking at the projects are serious. And and so they should be as well, Sarah, because I think the one thing that sort of always kind of gets forgotten about here is that certainly two of these projects, Outokumpu and Hamislahti, were ex-state-owned mines that stopped for corporate reasons rather than economic or resource depletion reasons. So Hamislahti especially, I think at the bottom in their last drive, they've got something in the order of like 15 metres at 3% would have been the next slot that they would have pulled out from that mine, but because it hit that 500-metre depth, that was corporate policy, shut the mine, we're moving on. So I think the larger mine building groups, they recognise that, probably not as obvious to retail and sort of the rest of the marketplace, but yeah, I think that there's opportunity. It's a slow burn, it'll take time, but the results will be good, I think. Okay,
and there's only so much you can talk about because, as you say, I'll be talking to Eric shortly about that. But I'm going to be indelicate. You are a very large shareholder. You bought many shares just before the placing. So kind of investors are wondering, why did you dilute yourself? Or actually, didn't you know that there was going to be a placing?
No, well, I think the placing came as a decision much later in the process. I think if you go back and sort of analyse what I did and when I did it, I actually pretty much sold out of Bluejay quite some time back. I think probably started not long after I left because of, basically what were at the time differences in philosophical and strategic approaches. And to a certain extent, I disagreed with a number of the larger shareholders, and I, rather than fighting with them, let them have the reins. And I removed myself from that situation, and more recently, I think sort of starting mid to late 23, saw the need to come back in and actually implement the strategy that probably should have been done in hindsight. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, but now we're getting on with what should have been done back then. So I bought my position back, and I was adding to that position all the way up until Christmas. The raising was something that WH Island, as you know, Harry Ansell, a very well-respected city grandee, I guess, we're all getting older, is on the board there as a non-executive director, and it was just interest through his clients that really triggered that decision. So look, I expect to be making more purchases of this stock moving forward, because I think we're on the right track now, and I think that the decisions that will shortly be sort of articulated to market will demonstrate that. I think that the work programs that, crossing fingers and crossing toes, that are coming up here potentially, they're gonna add to the value of this. So I'm pretty positive now. And look, Bluejay, when you sort of break it down into some of the parts, you've got 3 state-owned mines or ex-state-owned mines that are material assets. You've got Disko and Disko-Nuussuaq, and you've got Dundas as well, which now is fully permitted. We still have the Greenlandic Danish governments as shareholders. They're sort of stuck through this thick and thin. They ironically did agree with the proposed strategy changes some time back, but anyway, they're still there, and they're supportive as well. So, all the pieces here, when you step back and you look at all these things, they add up to more than £5 billion. I think we've all been doing this for long enough to realise that there's no reason why this couldn't, go up multiple times between now and just the recognition of the work programs and the starting again of, that sort of value creation engine.
But all these work programs sound enormous, but the amount of money that you've raised in comparison, size and scope, is quite modest. So I'm just wondering how you can preserve the cash without constraining the ambition.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, so starting with it from a philosophical perspective, we actually treat this money as our own, and I think that's one thing that everyone around town that knows me will say is that we save money. If we get an invoice or a tender or a proposal for 100,000, we'll get that thing for 67,000 before we sign it, right? And that's just our approach to all of this, because we want to be large shareholders. We don't want to draw huge wages. We see capital growth as being, much more tax effective, much easier to sort of implement. And if you're not hosing your money on silly things all the time, then you can actually make 1.2 million go a very long way. Now, having said that, the other issue, I guess, is you're saying yes, all these work programs, but keep in mind that KoBold, and I don't want to keep referencing them as such, but it's an example, is that only half of this joint venture that we have with them has been concluded or completed, I guess is the word. So there's still a commitment there should they choose to. And I still think that, within the halls of power of KoBold, there is a deep recognition that Disco is, something to be pursued, but we'll have to wait and see what they decide. So that's sort of taken care of. The Disko-Nuussuaq project, as I said, is on credit from previous expenditures, so we don't have a commitment there for the next 12 months. Dundas is a mining license, so there's no commitment there. And all of the Finnish assets, hopefully by mid-year, at least 2 of them are gone, and you might see quite a meaningful injection through that sale process. So I'm not worried at all about our cash position at the moment. If anything, it's stronger than it's been in the last 3 years. So.
Okay, but I'm just wondering about your personal resilience, because you are in roles of responsibility in many other companies, sort of more acquisitions, pollen formularies will see your name in the corporate structure there. So that's a lot of demands on your time. So does Bluejay have your full attention, or are you confident that the board is structured in such a way that you can all pull together and it's not all resting on your shoulders?
Yeah, well, look, it's not resting on my shoulders. One of the things as you get older is you meet, and it's probably the wrong term, but you collect good people. You surround yourself with good people. And this is one of the things that we have. I've got a situation down in Australia where I am an executive. Everything else is a non-exec, because the people involved are just as competent, if not more competent than me, especially with Bluejay. Eric is he's a great asset to the company, and we're very lucky that he was willing to come back in and assist myself with this. But he's going to be the point man. And the other thing is as well, Sarah, when you love doing what you do, it's not work, right? So it's I'm sort of always communicating with my people all over the world all the time, and it's a dynamic, continuous conversation that is very manageable. So it's the baton's being passed to the next generation of executive, and I sort of have now I just sort of in the rear with the gear and help from a sort of a strategy and just making sure that these things stay in their lanes.
Okay, so finally you've said that's a nice scene setter. And I know I'll be getting more details from Eric shortly, but what is the focus, the immediate focus over the next 3 months for Bluejay?
I don't want to sort of burn all the powder, but look, I think just to reiterate in short order, what we have got going on is there's already drill rigs deployed in Greenland. So it could be drilling on Disko-Nuussuaq or maybe other projects that we have there. We have an ongoing dialogue with KoBold. As I said, they're a very considered organisation. That they don't make snap decisions. They need to make sure that what the way forward is something that everybody is. It's a consensus-driven situation. So Disco, I think, will, if all the things fall the way we hope they will, Disco will be a huge value driver. We could very easily reposition those rigs anywhere in Greenland, and then I'm not 100% certain that we'll see anything of a transactional nature with respect to Finland, because I think 3 months is probably just a too short a time frame. But there are some conversations, and there is sort of appetite certainly being shown by a couple of parties in those data rooms. So I think the message really to shareholders is, the ship's been steadied now, and yes, that 1.2 million pound raising at 0.4 was a sort of it was a distressed capital raising that the company's funded. So it's not come raising anymore. I think just a natural progression of shareholders seeing the team that is now in place and sort of understanding the confidence that we have with Bluejay and moving these things forward. I think that's going to add to the overall flavour of things moving forward.
Rod McIllree, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much
Thanks,
indeed.
Sarah. All right, bye-bye.